to see you, Heather. I appreciate you making the time.
Great to be with you, Rosemary.
I want to start with, again, calls from President Zelensky criticizing NATO leaders about their refusal to implement a no-fly zone. Do you see this as something that Western leaders could eventually consider? And what would it take to get them there, Heather?
Yeah, I really don't think at this point a no-fly zone, although I totally appreciate why President Zelensky is asking for it. I mean, we see the devastation, primarily because what we're seeing is coming from what we call long-range fires. It's Russian artillery. It's not necessarily coming from Russian aircraft, although certainly Russian aircraft are delivering their missiles. So in some ways, it would not be entirely effective to stop this indiscriminate bombing. What we need to do is continue to make sure that Ukraine still has some control over its own airspace and can be and is able to defend itself from these missiles. So, missile defense capabilities, certainly Stinger missiles, the surface-to-air missiles, and we're seeing that they are having some effect. The fact that we may be considered flowing MiG-21s into Ukraine, this would be sort of a transfer of old fighter aircraft from Poland, Romania, and Slovakia to Ukraine. This is being considered right now, and then U.S. aircraft potentially would replace that. That's certainly probably a better idea to continue to flow defensive capabilities to Ukraine. But I simply think we're too late in defining a no-fly zone. It would require NATO to take out Russian artillery in Russia to do that, and that would be, of course, such a dramatic escalation of the conflict.
For sure. We have seen, obviously, in these first 11 days, sanction after sanction being imposed. I'm curious to know what is the next option for countries who are trying to find ways to sort of strangle Russia's economy. Certainly, we heard Secretary Blinken this morning talking about imports of Russian oil.
Yeah, this is where certainly the Biden administration has not wanted to go, because they're watching the price at the pump and watching certainly increased inflation. But that's exactly where they have to go. And in fact, in the hearing that I participated in this week in the Senate Armed Services Committee, it was clear to me that there was bipartisan support to do that. But again, we're going to have to accept a lot of sacrifice and pain ourselves. But it's going to, stop the flow of or purchasing, importing Russian oil and gas. That is really the next and most devastating step we can take.
I was reading the op-ed by Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, this morning, saying that it's no longer enough to express warm platitudes about rule-based international order. We're going to have to actively defend it. And I wonder whether you think that comment and realization comes too late, and whether there has been an underestimation of Putin and what he is prepared to do, despite what he has done in the past.
There has really been an underestimation of Vladimir Putin, and you could see that in the run-up to the invasion, because so many were refusing to believe the U.S. intelligence that we were providing, because to this point, Putin has always been what I call a cost-effective power, meaning he takes steps that aren't incredibly expensive to him. He gets away with it, and he keeps on pressing. But the cost to Vladimir Putin of this war is profound. Obviously, the costs that the Ukrainian people are bearing are just absolutely horrific. Mm-hmm. But this is the blowback within Russia today. We're seeing, protests across 53 cities. Upwards of 10,000 Russians have already been detained. The poverty, the repression that we're going to see in Russia is going to have significant consequences to Vladimir Putin. But Boris Johnson is right. We sort of used our rhetoric, and we weren't prepared for sacrifice for the international rules-based order. But we just talked about oil and gas sanctioning Russian imports, putting further pain on the Russian regime. It's got to be our next step.
I don't want to ask you how this is going to end, because that would not be an easy or kind question. But I do wonder, in light of what you just said there, what it could mean for Putin. I mean, I don't know if it could result in the end of the Putin regime. Is that something to consider?
Well, I think this is exactly what we should be considering right now. We should be thinking about what endgame looks like, because right now, even if Russia is successful in, let's just say, cutting Ukraine in half, controlling everything, east of the Dnieper River, they cannot hold Ukraine. This is going to be an occupation that is going to bleed and drain Russia. They cannot hold it. Meanwhile, back in Russia, poverty is going to spiral. This regime is just pressing repression. What does that mean? This is where we have to start preparing for, at some point, a different Russia, a Russia that's potentially fragmenting as we continue to strengthen Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia's Euro-Atlantic aspirations. I mean, he is driving the West closer together, and he is isolating Russia. That cannot end well.
Let me just end on sort of what you were talking about in that clip we played, and that is the ties between China and Russia and how all of this is affecting that relationship, Heather.
Yes, I mean, clearly Xi Jinping knew on February the 4th, when Putin and Xi signed their infamous 5,000-word statement, that a partnership that had no limits, he knew that Putin was going to invade, asking him to wait until after the Winter Olympics. But the Chinese did not sign up for what they're seeing right now. And they're very torn. Xi wants to support Putin. He wants to maintain economic ties with Europe and the United States, and he wants to protect territorial integrity and sovereignty. Xi Jinping cannot manage all three of those objectives. So they're going to have a very careful balancing act in the future.
Heather Conley, so you're so smart, and I appreciate you lending some of your thoughts to us this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rosemary.